Champion Vextortha believed he was untouchable, not because he hoped so, but because the facts proved it. He wore 300,000 credit battle armor, the finest armor ever made for a Kren warrior, built to survive plasma fire, built to resist explosions, built to win wars. And in his mind, nothing in the galaxy could break it. Then a human instructor tapped it once, and it exploded. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. I am Vexer of the Kren .17 campaign ribbons .300. And 47 confirmed victories, survivor of the Bleeding Moons conflict, winner of ritual combat against a Targoyan champion in my culture that makes me elite. Among warriors, I was respected. Among instructors, I was expected to lead. Among students, I was to be admired. When I arrived at Station Helios 9 for advanced combat training, I walked in with confidence. My crest was high. My scales were polished. My armor was perfectly fitted. This was supposed to be a formality that I was there to learn. Advanced techniques, not to be taught by someone smaller than my chest plate. Then I saw her, Lieutenant Iris Calloway. Human, small, calm, quiet. She was standing in the training hall, reading from a data pad like it was just another normal day. She didn't look up when I entered. "You must be Vex," she said calmly, not impressed, not nervous, not afraid, just calm. That was my first mistake, underestimating calm. When she finally looked at me, her brown eyes were steady, no fear in them. "I will be your combat instructor for this rotation," she said. That I laughed. Not politely. My mandibles clicked with amusement. Around me, other trainees exchanged looks. This tiny human was going to teach me. I had fought in 12 major battles. I had defeated champions in ritual combat. I had earned the Crimson Talon honor. This felt like an insult. "With respect," I said, though my tone had none. "There must be a mistake." She didn't react. Angered. Embarrassment. Just a small smile. That smile made something in the room feel different. "I'm assigned as your hand-to-hand specialist," she replied. "If you'd like a transfer, I can prepare the paperwork in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. She said it like it was nothing. The other trainees were watching now, waiting, measuring, and why pride grew heavier inside my chest. A Kren warrior does not retreat. "No transfer necessary," I said firmly. She nodded. "Good. Then we begin today." She walked to the center of the mat like she was taking a casual stroll, not tense, not defensive, not armored, just wearing a simple gray uniform, no protective gear. Nothing. Meanwhile, I began preparing, because protocol is protocol, and I would not risk embarrassment. That my armor was engineering perfection. Energy shields, kinetic dampeners, full environmental sealing. Rated to survive artillery-level impacts. That IT cost 300,000 credits. Custom-built, 7-cycle waiting list. That IT had kept me alive through plasma, fire, and explosive strikes. Nothing had ever damaged IT. I sealed the final chest plate. The system hummed. All green, fully operational. "Impressive," Iris said casually from across the mat. She hadn't changed her uniform. Still no armor, still calm. "That's expensive armor," she added. "Military grade," I replied proudly. She smiled slightly. "It would be a shame if something happened to it." That sentence should have warned me. But pride blinds, and I was already committed. Around us, spectators gathered. Engineers, soldiers, other species. Someone began taking bets. The room filled with quiet excitement. Everyone wanted to see the human instructor fail, including me. "Standard rules," Iris said. "You wear armor. I do not. First contact wins." First contact. I almost laughed again. She was giving me the first move, like a master offering a child a handicap. "I'll come to you," I replied. That MY sensors locked on her. MY armor was ready. This would be over quickly. She tilted her head slightly. That smile returned. "Whenever you're ready, champion." That word, champion, sounded almost different when she said it, but I ignored it. I charged. My armor systems flared as I accelerated across the mat. The kinetic dampeners adjusted automatically. Impact projections calculated optimal force transfer. I aimed for a controlled strike, enough to prove superiority, not to injure. After all, this was training. why armored fist moved toward her center mass. She did not step back. She did not brace. She simply shifted at a half step to the side. That was all. My strike passed through empty air. Before I could correct, something happened that my combat sensor struggled to interpret. She tapped my chest plate, not punched, not struck with force, tapped point one finger. Light contact. There was a sound at a sharp crack, like metal under sudden pressure. Then my armor status lights flickered. For half a second, everything stayed green. Then the system screamed warnings in rapid succession. Structural failure, energy containment breach, kinetic feedback overload, emergency shutdown initiated. What? I began. The chest plate exploded outward in a burst of harmless sparks and shattered composite layers. Not an explosion of destruction, an engineered release. The armor did not fail from damage. It failed from internal stress. Redistribution triggered by our contact. The entire hall went silent. My visor display went dark. When my systems rebooted, I was standing in the center of the mat. Armor gone. Only fragments remained at my feet. Lieutenant Iris Calloway stood one step away, calm, unharmed, unmoving. She looked at the broken armor pieces, then back at me. Lesson 1, she said gently. Never assume protection equals invulnerability. The room was dead quiet. Engineers stared at the debris. Officers whispered. Someone dropped a data pad. I felt exposed. Not physically, psychologically. My crest lowered involuntarily. That armor was rated for plasma impact, I said slowly. Yes, she replied. And it did its job. I blinked. My job, she continued, isn't to break armor with brute force. She pointed lightly at the shattered remains. It's to understand how it's built. The words settled like gravity. You relied on its strength, she said. So I targeted its assumptions. My mind replayed the moment. The tap, the system spike, the cascading failure. She hadn't overpowered the armor. She had disrupted at point one precise interaction. That was all. She stepped closer, not threatening, not dominant, just close enough to be heard clearly. In real combat, she said quietly, your opponent won't try to match your strengths. She looked directly into my eyes. They'll look for what you believe cannot fail. The room felt smaller. For the first time since I arrived at Station Helios 9, I felt something unfamiliar. Not humiliation, not anger. Learning. Slowly, I removed the rest of the damaged plating. Heavy pieces dropped to the floor. The cost no longer mattered. The confidence did it. I stood there without armor, without shields, without status, just scales and breath. Lieutenant Calloway extended her hand. Not to mock, not to celebrate. To continue, she asked. Around us, silence remained. The bets were forgotten. The spectators were no longer laughing. I looked at her hand, then at the broken armor, then back at her calm expression. For the first time in my career, I realized I might not be the most dangerous being in the room. And that thought did not feel like defeat. IT felt like the beginning of something greater. That I lowered my crest slightly. Yes, instructor, I said, let us continue. And this time, I did not charge. I listened. The next session began without armor, for everyone. Instructor Calloway dismissed the rest of the trainees to observation duty and ordered the training mat cleared. This rotation isn't about strength, she announced. It's about adaptability. Some of the Korean students looked uncomfortable. Without armor, without shields, the room felt vulnerable. That I understood that feeling now that I stood across from her again. This time, no defensive systems and no calculated advantage. Only my body and training. She walked to the center. Rule change, she said calmly. No first contact win. A few students muttered in surprise. Instead, she continued, objective control. Control. In Korean doctrine, control meant dominance. In human doctrine, I would soon learn, it meant something different. Attack freely, she instructed me. I won't counter with force. That sounded suspiciously easy, but I had learned something already. I moved carefully. Not a charge, a measured advance, and I tested her guard with a feint to the left. She adjusted smoothly. In a wasted motion that I struck toward her shoulder, controlled, restrained. She redirected my arm with a minimal pivot. Not strength. Timing to wide balance shifted slightly. She used that shift, not to throw me, but to guide me. My feet crossed involuntarily, and suddenly I was off center. She tapped my elbow, not hard, just precise. My arm dropped uselessly to a nerve cluster stimulated by pressure alone, and I stepped back instinctively. She didn't pursue. She waited. "You're fast," she said. Not praise, observation, but speed without awareness is predictable. I circled her now, studying. This time, I did not think about winning, that I thought about understanding. That I attacked again. This time, changing rhythm mid-strike, that a tactic that had worked in ritual combat countless times. She didn't block. She stepped inside the arc of my motion. Too close that my instinct screamed danger, but she wasn't attacking. She placed her foot behind mine, shifted her shoulder lightly against my chest, and used my own forward momentum to unbalance me. I fell, controlled, onto the mat. Not slammed, not injured. Just placed there by physics. She stepped back immediately, and followed dash up, an domination pose. Just neutral stance. Silence filled the room again. That I lay on the mat, staring at the ceiling lights. Then I laughed, not prideful this time. Genuine. "I see," I said. She extended her hand again. That I accepted it and stood. "Your species trains for endurance and power," she explained. "Mine trains for efficiency." Efficiency. That word felt dangerous. "Your armor," she continued, "made you comfortable." "Yes," I admitted, "and comfort makes blind spots." She walked toward the edge of the mat and picked up a training baton. Not a weapon, a standard practice tool. She tossed it lightly to me. "Attack me with this," she said. Now that was interesting. That a weapon leveler. I tested its balance. Different from Kryn combat tools. Lighter, quicker. That I nodded. This time, I didn't rush. That I analyzed. Distance, foot placement, breathing rhythm. She didn't change her stance. In feared, in tension. That I advanced slowly. Struck. She deflected the baton with minimal movement. But this time I noticed something. She wasn't reacting to the baton. She was reacting to my weight shift. Intent. That was the difference. She wasn't fighting my action. She was reading my decisions. And that changed everything. That I altered strategy mid-exchange. Instead of overpowering, I paused, stopped moving completely. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Good." Now she adjusted. Because stillness is unpredictable, she approached cautiously. When she was within reach, I didn't strike. I dropped the baton. It hit the floor, and I stepped back. "You win," I said. The room erupted in whispers. She tilted her head. "This isn't about winning," she replied. "I know," I said. "This is about survival." A small smile. "Exactly." She turned to the class. "Lesson 2, she announced. "Never assume the strongest armor is metal." She gestured toward me. "Sometimes it's awareness." I stood straighter. Not with pride this time, but with understanding. The armor I lost earlier no longer felt like humiliation. It felt like tuition. Later that evening, as the trainees left, I approached her privately. "Instructor Calloway," I said formally. She waited. "I request continued training beyond this rotation." She nodded once. "Good." Then she added something unexpected. "You have the instincts of a commander." I paused. "But you're willing to learn," she continued. "That makes you dangerous in the right way." Dangerous. For the first time, that word felt like a compliment. Across the station, the shattered armor had already been analyzed by engineering teams. They discovered something remarkable. That IT hadn't failed from weakness. That IT had failed because it was designed with assumptions about combat patterns. Patterns that humans do not follow. The engineers requested a meeting with Instructor Calloway. She agreed. Yes, for me. I returned to my quarters that night without armor. For the first time in my life, I did not feel vulnerable. I felt aware. And somewhere in the quiet corridors of Station Helios 9, a Kryn champion began the slow transformation into something greater than a warrior. He began to learn. And the human instructor? She never once raised her voice. She never needed to. Because true strength doesn't announce itself. IT teaches. The following morning, Station Helios 9 buzzed with activity. Trainees practiced drills. Engineers calibrated weapons. The aroma of synthesized coffee drifted through the corridors, but I wasn't in the gym. I was in the observation deck, watching Instructor Calloway. She moved with purpose, but her calmness hadn't wavered. Other instructors spoke in hurried tones. She didn't rush. She observed, analyzed, then acted. Every motion efficient, every decision precise. That I realized something important. This wasn't just combat training. This was strategy, perception, anticipation. That I approached her cautiously. Instructor, I said, I wish to understand more than hand-to-hand techniques. She looked at me, her brown eyes steady. Then you must learn to see the battlefield before it exists. Not just react. Anticipate. I nodded. Humans spoke in simplicity, but their lessons carried weight. You will begin with observation drills, she continued. No weapons. No automat. Just watch. Record. Analyze. And act when necessary. I frowned. It sounded easy. Too easy. You think this is trivial, she said, reading my expression. It's not. Most warriors rely on reaction, instinct, power. But understanding gives you choices others don't have. And choices win wars. The first drill was simple in appearance. A simulation of a skirmish, holographic opponents on the mat. The system controlled them. Speed, strength, numbers, all adjustable. Observe, she instructed that I did. At first, I focused on the obvious. Patterns of attack, weapon angles, movement speed. But she stopped me. Not the obvious, she said. The subtle. How opponents hesitate. How they adjust to failure. What they fear. What they ignore. Those are your clues. Hours passed. I recorded every twitch, every shift, every hesitation. I learned to anticipate attacks before they started. I realized that my previous victories, my ritual combat wins, had been brute force. My armor had carried me. My instincts had saved me. But awareness had never been my weapon. She watched silently. Occasionally, she would interject. A slight adjustment in stance. A question designed to make me think. Every interaction sharpened my mind, not just my reflexes. By the end of the day, I was exhausted. But something had shifted. I no longer felt invincible. I felt capable. And that capability was more dangerous than any armor. After the drill, we returned to the training hall. The other trainees were waiting. Some smirked. Others whispered about my loss to the human instructor. But I ignored them. Instructor Calloway addressed the group. Lesson 3. Strength without awareness is a liability. Armor is temporary. Knowledge endures. Adaptability wins. I caught her glance. A small, approving nod. For the first time, I understood the full weight of her teaching. This wasn't just combat. It was preparation for anything. Ambushes, negotiations, survival, and leadership. That I thought about my previous victories. My armor, my reputation, they no longer mattered as much. What mattered was what I could learn quickly, efficiently, and without pride getting in the way. As the hall emptied, she approached me. You're progressing, she said, faster than I expected. I straightened. I intend to learn everything you can teach me. She allowed a faint smile. Good. Tomorrow, we introduce unpredictability. You'll face scenarios that can't be solved by strength or training alone. Only adaptation. I nodded, anticipation rising. For the first time, I didn't dread the next battle. I welcomed it, because now I was beginning to fight like a human. And humans, I realized, fought differently than any warrior I had ever encountered. The unpredictability training began on the third day. Instructor Calloway changed everything in a announcement, in a warning. When I entered the hall, the lights were dimmed. The training mat was gone. In its place were shifting holographic environments, corridors, open fields, urban structures, zero-gravity space. Today, she said calmly, you don't fight me. I tilted my head. Then who? She tapped the console. The room transformed that we were now inside a simulated civilian transport under attack. Alarms blared. Smoke filled the air. Civilians screamed. Multiple hostile signatures appeared on my visor. Your objective, she said, is not to defeat enemies. She looked directly at me. It's to protect people. That was different, very different. In ritual combat, there was an opponent, a clear target. Here, there were dozens of variables. The hostiles advanced aggressively. Blaster fire simulated through the environment. I reacted instinctively, moving toward the largest threat. She stopped me with one word, Prioritize. I paused. She continued calmly, guiding without commanding. Who is in immediate danger? What route reduces harm? What action ends the conflict fastest? My mind shifted. Not attack. Assess. The hostiles weren't coordinated well. Their formation had weaknesses, but charging in would cause collateral damage. Instead, I redirected civilians toward the emergency exits, using cover strategically. I disabled threats in ways that minimized escalation. Not overpowering, controlling space. Every move required thought. Not string T1 point. A simulated enemy aimed toward a group of trainees that MY instinct screamed to intercept directly. But I remembered her lesson. Anticipate that I didn't move toward the attacker, that I moved to the environment structural panel and triggered a containment door, isolating the threat before it could fire. Efficiency. The system registered success. The scenario ended. Lights returned that I stood there, breathing heavily, not from exhaustion, but from focus. Instructor Calloway stepped forward. You didn't win, she said as I waited. You solved it. That felt better. She walked closer. Warriors defeat enemies, she said. Leaders prevent unnecessary battles. The other trainees were silent. Some looked at me differently now. Not as the armored champion, but as something changing. Instructor Calloway addressed the class. Real strength isn't about being untouchable, she said. It's about being adaptable under pressure. Vex has learned that quickly. Vex. Not Vextorther, just Vex that I realized she had been shortening my name since day one. Not disrespect. Familiarity. Trust. After the session ended, I approached her once more. Instructor, I said, why teach humans and non-humans together? She looked toward the viewing windows, where stars glowed outside the station. Because conflict in the galaxy doesn't care about species, she replied. But cooperation can change outcomes. That sentence stayed with me. Later that week, Station Helios 9 received an emergency alert that a nearby convoy was under threat from pirates. Senior officers prepared response teams. Instructor Calloway volunteered our training unit for support. This was unexpected. We were students, but she looked at me before departure. This is not about proving yourself, she said quietly. It's about applying what you've learned. For the mission, I wore lighter tactical gear, no heavy armor. My movements were unrestricted, and for the first time in my life, I did not rely on protection, that I relied on awareness. The engagement was swift, not because we were stronger, because we were coordinated, that I anticipated enemy flanking patterns. Instructor Calloway predicted their retreat path. Together, we neutralized the threat efficiently, minimizing damage. Unnecessary destruction. Ego. Just outcome. When the convoy was secured, the commander of the station reviewed the operation. That he looked at me, then at her, then said something unexpected. Your rotation has changed this unit's performance metrics significantly. Instructor Calloway responded simply. He learned. That was it. Celebration. Dramatic speech that on the return to the station. I stood beside her near the viewport. The stars stretched endlessly beyond. I no longer believe I am untouchable, I said. She nodded. That's good. But, I added, I believe I am stronger than before. She smiled, yes. Because now your strength has direction. Silence settled comfortably between us. For the first time since arriving at Station Helios 9, I understood something fundamental. Armor can be destroyed. Reputation can fade. Victories can be forgotten. But growth remains. And somewhere in the galaxy, a former champion began teaching others what he had learned. Not just how to fight, but how to think. And Instructor Calloway, she never needed to raise her voice. Because the most powerful weapon in the room was never her strength. It was her understanding.